bienvenue, hello and welcome. Today we have another book, a book especially chosen because the 11th of the 11th is coming up on this weekend, so we wanted to do a book that would for that. So anyway, before we get started, remember there is our shop. Redbubble shop has lots of pretty things. And then there is our shop, our website, which has books and writing services, all sorts of things. You can check them both out. Links down below. And please like and subscribe to the videos if you enjoy this. It really helps us out. Watching to the end really helps us out. Recommending us to your friends really helps us out. So those are all ways that you can help us out with the videos that we make. So what is the books that we are having a look at this week? Well, this week we are having a look at a book that I have had for a very long time. It is, and I think that a lot of people know this book because they have done it at school. I read it not as a student, but I bought it myself. And recently there was a new film, a German film of it. There's other films of it. So of course, what am I talking about? But I am talking about the World War I German classic, All Quiet on the Western Front by Erich Maria Remarque. So All Quiet on the Western Front, which was written in 1928 and it was published in 1928 and serialized in a newspaper, and in 1929 it was published as a book. By 1930 it had been published not only in Germany but America, England, France, and had sold 2.5 million copies. 2.5 million copies. It was made into a film by Universal Studios in 1930. The film was then shown in Germany, and it was famously disrupted by the nascent Nazi party. So, All Quiet on the Western Front was one of the many books that was burned by the Nazis in their big book burnings. So it is a very interesting book in terms of its history, and the fact that this book, written by a German, was embraced by Allied countries. So why was this book so incredibly influential? So in 1928, 10 years after the end of the First World War, the assumption had been that nobody is particularly interested in a realistic depiction of the First World War, that war is not really something that people want to talk about. We want to drink and dance and jazz and things. So the idea of there being an audience that wanted this book was not immediately apparent to the media makers. The fact that this book, however, in the first 2 years of its existence, had sold over 2.5 million copies and had been translated into 2 other languages, English and French, serves to say that people who had is served or wish to understand what their loved ones had gone through, there was this appetite for. It is quite interesting, especially since wartime censorship meant that this book was really one of the first places that people saw an uncensored, in terms of the violence, in terms of the suffering of the ordinary soldier. So, and looking through this, I read this when I was 18. Looking about the same age as the narrator Paul. Looking through this, I was I did not remember this as graphic as it is. And yeah, it is very, very, honest, very, it's graphic. The violence, the violence of that is happened to the bodies of the men in mechanized warfare is graphically told. Not sensationalist, not gratuitous, not for the sake of that, but as part of the understanding of the experience of the men who fought. So, what is the story? The story is of a young man named Paul and many of his classmates who all signed up for the war, the First World War, encouraged by teachers and the society at large, who say this is big adventure, yada, yada, yada. You know, the sort of things that people will say when it comes to the signing up narrative. And then it looks at the war experience of this group of young men as they go through battles, as they die. They all die. Paul dies at the end. It is part of the book. As all these people die, and the experiences that they have. Not only as they die, also as they kill. One of the, probably, without having to reread this, the scene that has stood with me for the longest time, and I think it is probably a scene that has stood with a great many people who have read this for a long time, is the killing the Frenchman in the shell crater, where Paul kills the Frenchman. And that is a long, it is a quiet scene in amongst a lot of the chaos of the war. And yet it is probably the most powerful scene in the book. One thing I would say about this book. We have looked at a lot of German books. Now, this is a very important book, okay? It's a very important book. It is generally young people's first impression of First World War. It is, I actually read this book not in English class, but I read extracts of it in modern history when we were studying the First World War. So I was being given this book as a source, a historical source. And that, I think, we will discuss that. So most people encounter this book when they are about the same age as Paul, when they are 16, 17, 18. So when most people encounter this book, they are not in a position to think very critically about the work itself. It is like, oh, this is a book, and it is the mud and the blood and the gore and the horror and all. Oui. It is all of that, and it must be true. Parce que, why do we do this? Because we are young and stupid, and we do not have enough context to put something in. Now, it is often given to young people as a book to read, because the characters are young, they are similar age. It is a war novel. It has lots of boy characters in, so the English teacher goes, I know what I can get to get my disengaged boys encouraged to read. I'll give them more quiet on the Western France. They will enjoy that. It's got plenty of violence in it. They'll read that, because I'm grasping at straws at this moment to get these boys literate. Do not think I have not seen that. But it is also a book that people very rarely return to. I have not seen very many reviews or discussion of this book. When I went to look as I do, academic essays about the book, I did not find a huge amount. It is not a heavily written about book on an academic level. And I think that is interesting. There is a lot of teacher resources for this book, not a lot of academic discourse as a narrative. So, this is a German book. And this is the least German book I have ever read. I have brought you Hess, I have brought you Mann, I have brought you Goethe. No, I have not brought you Goethe. Her Ladyship have brought you Goethe. Twice Goethe. German novels are something that we enjoy doing. In fact, we have some more Mann coming. I just bought a big Cambridge companion to Mann, so that I can read the two Mann that I recently bought. Unfortunately, translation, so we have that problem with Mann. Mais we will jump that horse when it comes to it. Anyway, this is not like any other German books that I have read. I have talked to you before that you cannot read a German book only on the surface, because German books are multi-layered, that they take multiple readings. This one does not take multiple readings. Mais remarque, et no Mann or Hess or Goethe is not that level of writer. Okay? This is not a book that is ever discussed in terms of his language, his use of language, his use of technique, his use of all the ways that he constructs his narratives. None of these things are particularly innovative, revolutionary. It is close first person. Is a first-person account until the very end, where you bring in this narrator, sort of the way that Werther brings in the narrator because he's dead. I actually know Werther brings in the narrator because he's gone so loopy he cannot keep a coherent narrative any longer. This one brings in a narrator because Paul is dead. And you cannot narrate your own death. Oh, maybe you can. You're sufficiently egotistical, you could narrate your own death. I doubt it. Anyway, in terms of narrative structure, this is not a terribly innovative novel. It is not a terribly German novel in the way that we have looked at German novels. It is not working on multiple levels. It is straight. This is how you read it, which is why it is an easy book to give to students, because it doesn't have multiple levels of meaning. Just read the thing, you'll understand it. Is that always satisfactory? No, that is not always satisfactory. Mais, what this book is, however, is the novel of war novels for the 20th century. The novel, the ones that brings forth all the other narratives are all indebted to this one. Parce que you look at how war is described in this novel and then look at war in War and Peace, which is only a few decades earlier. War and Peace is a very different way of talking about war. War and Peace is very much a novel about acting, about striving, about individuals making difference in the world, even if they die. But that individuals have a fate and destiny. When you look at earlier than this story, look at the history plays. Look at the history plays of Shakespeare. And there you have all these rich characters. You have these rich characters. Is Osper somehow alienated from his environment? No, Osper is part of his environment. This great warrior is Hal, the great warrior king. You have the duplicity of someone like Falstaff. You have the rogue like Pistol. You have these distinctive types of characters that are in this war story. You have the wonderful Captain Llewellyn and Captain Glower. You have all these different levels of soldier. You have these different understandings of war. It is actually complex in its own way. When you look at, say, Henry V has a lot of, which is completely a war play, has a lot of interesting interactions, interesting hierarchies, interesting types of characters that is not something that you will then find in this book. This book is an novel for the 20th century. And one of the things that makes this different from something like War and Peace, from something like Shakespeare history plays, this is a novel in which the soldiers are swept along. There is a passivity to the men in the novel, which is, I think, why the killing of the Frenchman in the bomb crater is particularly memorable, because it is one of the few places where Paul actually acts. Paul and his friends are swept along in this tide, this mobilized, mechanized, mechanistic, that is the word I am looking for, mechanistic modern world of war. It is a very different war. It is a war in which individuals are important in the face of the industrialized machine of war. Which means this is a very different narrative to the earlier narratives. And this has an influence on narratives moving forward in the 20th century. The idea of being swept along by forces outside of your control. You see that in Dr. Zhivago. We might do Dr. Zhivago, I'm not sure. But it also opened up a desire for more of these sorts of narratives. In England, you get Siegfried Sassoon. You get Robert Graves. In America, you get Ernest Hemingway and A Farewell to Arms. So you get suddenly, this book was so incredibly successful that all of a sudden, there is a desire for stories about the war. Mais the thing that characterizes the stories about the war is the break from the older tradition of individuals, of heroism, of individual action having an impact on the way that the battle or the war will take place, and to the passive pushed on quality of the individual soldier in the huge mechanized, industrialized war machine. Now, this narrative, although it worked for the First World War, and the First World War was a war of such magnitude and such loss that it became important for survivors to mythologize their position and their the whole thing to give it some sort of meaning. There is the mythologizing of the passivity of the soldier is part of the mythologizing. This book does not. Part of the reason it was adopted across enemy lines is that it places the blame for the war not on it places the blame for the war on something remote, on officers, on following orders, on authority figures. It does not bother to mention, but we invaded France, or we invaded Belgium and then France. There is no quality of taking responsibility for, there would not have been a war had we not gone and invaded Belgium and France. So that is not part of it. It is seen as a political. The anger is directed to authority figures, the people who lied to them about it being an adventure, that sort of thing. It is an abdication of responsibility of how did the war start? And that passivity is, given that this is the novel for war in the 20th century, that is a somewhat a dangerous thing when you look at later wars in the 20th century. Because to expand the passive quality of the soldiers in this book into, say, German soldiers of the Second World War, or American soldiers in Vietnam, all of a sudden, it starts to sound a little bit like I was just following orders. Yes, I'm entirely blameless for destroying that village of innocent civilians because it was war and we did not know what was happening. And I cannot possibly be blamed for all those dead children. Now, that is not Remarque's fault. That is not Remarque's fault. I am not for once am I saying that is remarks for. Mais it is a limitation of the style of narrative that he pioneered in this novel. It is not because this novel is taught with history. It is taught with history because it is seen as an account of soldiers at the front, and finding something that is so uncensored in terms of its brutality and violence is very hard to find, to provide to students. Mais it is still a narrative. It is not a memoir. In fact, the memoirs if you look at Robert Graves' Goodbye to All That, the memoirs are nowhere near as sensational. The memoirs are somewhat boring, because Mendy don't spend as much time at the front as Paul does in this novel. For instance, it is averaged that 12 days at the front for the average Australian on the whole. They spent a very little time at the front. On average, that means some spend more, some spend less, but one did not spend one's entire war at the front. Men go circulate, even though the people at the top did not fully understand PTSD, and they did understand that you couldn't leave men at the front indefinitely because they would mutiny. Look what happened in Russia and France. If you do not rotate your men, which is part of the reason why they needed so many men. It is not just because of the casualty numbers, it is also because you have to rotate them. You cannot leave them there. They will actually go mad. They will go mad. They will also be very, very tired. You cannot leave them at the front on a permanent basis. So there is a lot in this that is less, it is more condensed, it is more sensationalized than the reality. It is a novel. And so as a history device, it needs to be fully understood as such. As a novel, it needs to be, for all its honesty of the battlefront, it needs to be understood. It is a construct. It is designed to be a particular type of evoking something particular for the reader. For the men of Remarque's time, it was an opportunity. This novel gives them an opportunity to be seen, to have their experiences seen by people, which was very, very important. Mais it is constructed. It has a particular point of view, and that point of view is not necessarily applicable across all conflict or even outside of this novel. To assume that this is the only point of view is to obscure the actual story, the narrative, which is, as anyone who has studied history will tell you, is multifaceted, multi-leveled, and much, much more complex than what can be illustrated in a novel. So, I hope that does not. I hope that does not put you off this. It is a very fine novel. It is interesting in terms of its historical positioning. It is interesting in terms of it telling a story and giving voice to a generation that had been silenced and was at risk of being forgotten or unrecognized. Mais it is a novel and it should be remembered as such. I would highly recommend it. Mais it is not history. If you want history, read a history book. Okay? So, and the narrative style, the narrative focus is not applicable across all conflict. This has influenced how we tell war stories, and it is not always appropriate. You do not want to allow a passivity to absolve one of shameful or guilt or criminal act. And that is something that is not every soldier was an innocent victim. That is something to remember. Not everybody is Paul. Especially when you move through history. Paul is a character just the same as Falstaff or Prince André or any other, or Captain Eucerian. There's a book that I think Janice will have to do. Catch-22. But it is the great anti-war novel, the anti-war novel, something that I do encourage you to have a look at. As a German novel, it is a very, very easy German novel to access. In fact, it is so easy. I'm kind of like, this is like you're reading an English novel. Where's the challenge in a German novel that has no challenge? Anyway, I do recommend it. But it is not history. It is a novel. I will see you again later, and until then, au revoir. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.